Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is glaring hypocrisy when you have Republicans on the other side of the aisle trying to create definitions and say Rashida wants to annihilate people, when Max Miller himself went on TV and said we're turning Gaza into a parking lot and we want to annihilate Palestinians. Nobody condemned him on that side of the aisle. What is true here is that every single one of them has not acknowledged the fact that Palestinians are dying in the tens of thousands, but will continue to say it is us who are not acknowledging humanity. Rashida will stand strong.
Gentlelady's time has expired.
Movement.
The debate opened with strong back-and-forth arguments and accusations of unfair treatment. Democrats claimed Republicans were being inconsistent, ignoring offensive remarks made by their own members while condemning Ilhan Omar for hers. One representative cited Max Miller, reminding the room that he once made a harsh comment about Gaza but faced almost no backlash. That example set off a fiery conversation about double standards and what fairness really means in Congress. Viewers could easily feel the tension rising, a reflection of how deeply divided Washington has become. When Max Miller finally took the floor, his delivery was measured but forceful. He argued that Omar should not serve on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, saying the group speaks for America around the world and deals with issues of security and trust. Miller claimed Omar's past statements had weakened that trust, even noting that Israel had once denied her entry back in 2019. He stressed that this wasn't just about political disagreement. It was about credibility and responsibility. In his view, the question was whether she could truly represent the nation's values on the global stage, making the debate feel bigger than party politics itself.
This time I would yield 6 minutes to Max Miller from the great state of Ohio.
The gentleman is recognized for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from Mississippi for yielding. Mr. Speaker, the House Committee on Foreign Affairs has broad jurisdiction over national security and foreign policy, peacekeeping and peace enforcement, international law, and the promotion of democracy, and many other critical issues that require its members to be both objective and credible. Members of the Committee on Foreign Affairs represent the United States abroad and are regarded as credible emissaries of American foreign policy. Their words have significant weight in guiding our relations with other countries and are relied upon by world leaders. Most importantly, our allies such as Israel, the forever home of the Jewish people.
One of Miller's strongest moments came when he reminded Congress that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had once denied Ilhan Omar entry into Israel. Miller repeated Netanyahu's reasoning that while Israel values its friendship with the United States, it cannot host someone who supports movements aimed at isolating or undermining the country. To Miller, this decision spoke volumes. If one of America's closest allies viewed Omar as biased, he argued, how could she fairly represent U.S. interests in shaping foreign policy? He went on to underline the deep, decades-long partnership between the United States and Israel, a bond built on trust, cooperation, and shared security goals. For more than 75 years, Israel has been one of America's most dependable partners, providing key intelligence and standing by the U.S. through turbulent times in the Middle East. Miller argued that any tension in that relationship wasn't just a personal issue. It could weaken one of America's most vital global alliances. His closing point was sharp and unmistakable. Leaders on the Foreign Affairs Committee must be able to work with America's allies, not divide them. His remarks drew firm applause from Republicans and highlighted how central the U.S.-Israel relationship remains in Washington's political landscape.
But what happens when a committee member is no longer viewed as a credible emissary of our foreign policy? What if a member is barred from visiting one of our allies because of their prejudiced comments? How can members who are unable to engage with our allies in a constructive manner be considered credible members of the committee? Well, the gentlelady's discriminatory comments disqualified her from traveling to Israel in 2019. Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, would not allow Representative Omar to enter, saying, "We respect all political parties in the United States equally. However, we will also respect ourselves. Whoever comes to impose boycotts on us and to deny the legitimacy of the State of Israel, we will not allow them entry." Yes, the gentle lady disqualified herself from entry into one of the most important countries allied with the United States. Over the past 75 years, Israel has been a steadfast ally of the United States. Israel has stood by us through the volatility in the Middle East, and this alliance has been critical to our own national security. How can someone not welcomed by one of our most important allies serve as an emissary of American foreign policy on the Foreign Affairs Committee? And given her biased comments against Israel,
Miller next addressed one of the most talked about moments in Ilhan Omar's public career, her 2019 tweet suggesting that political backing for Israel was linked to financial influence. He said that kind of comment echoed long-standing and offensive stereotypes about Jewish people and money. Miller pointed out that it wasn't only Republicans who found the remark troubling. Several Democratic leaders had also spoken out against it at the time. By revisiting the incident, he argued that Omar's words showed a repeated lapse in judgment, one that, in his opinion, raised doubts about her ability to represent the U.S. responsibly on international matters. The debate turned more emotional when Miller brought up Omar's earlier comments about the September 11th attacks. He said her choice of words came across as dismissive toward one of the darkest days in American history. Adding a personal note, he reflected on how that tragedy inspired many, including himself, to serve the country and protect its people. Miller reminded everyone that for countless families, firefighters, police officers, and soldiers, the events of that day remain deeply personal, a symbol of unity, loss, and national strength. To him, any statement that seemed to downplay that pain was not only insensitive, but disrespectful to those who gave everything in the wake of 9/11. His delivery grew emotional yet steady, underscoring the sense that this issue was about more than politics. It was about loyalty, respect, and shared national memory.
and against the Jewish people. How can she serve as an objective decision maker on the committee? Let's take a look at some of the gentlelady's comments. In February of 2019, barely more than a month after becoming a member of this body, Representative Omar suggested that the Jewish people and the American Israel Public Affairs Committee were buying political support, writing on Twitter, "It's all about the Benjamins, baby," clearly amplifying an anti-Semitic stereotype about the Jewish people and money. In response, congressional Democratic leadership, her own party, immediately released a statement by saying, "Anti-Semitism must be called out, confronted, and condemned wherever it is encountered, without exception." Not long after Representative Omar trivialized the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001, by describing that day of infamy as, "Some people did something." That's horrific. Some people did something. Yes, Mr. Speaker, some people did do something. Some people committed evil acts of terrorism and killed nearly 3,000 Americans. And in response, some thousands of our fellow citizens, myself included, enlisted in our armed forces to defend the gentlelady's right to make her prejudiced remarks. Many went off to combat and even died to defend that.
Miller then criticized Omar for previously comparing the United States and Israel to groups like the Taliban and Hamas. He called those remarks unfair and deeply insulting, explaining that the U.S. and Israel are democratic nations governed by law, while the Taliban and Hamas are violent extremist organizations known for spreading fear and oppression. Miller reminded the chamber that even several Democratic members had publicly rejected her comments back then, calling them misleading and inappropriate. That reaction, he argued, proved the issue wasn't about politics. It was about basic fairness, truth, and national unity. He continued by saying these weren't isolated remarks, but part of a broader pattern in Omar's public record. From her Benjamin's tweet to her statements on September 11th, apartheid, and extremist groups, Miller claimed her words repeatedly showed poor judgment and a lack of respect for American values and alliances. He made it clear that his criticism wasn't personal. It was about protecting the country's credibility and standing in the world. Miller framed his argument as a matter of integrity and security, insisting that positions on the Foreign Affairs Committee should be held by those who represent America's principles clearly and consistently. His closing message was firm. This decision, he said, wasn't driven by politics, but by the responsibility to safeguard how America is seen and trusted across the globe.
Right. But they did not die fighting to have their bravery and love of country undermined by a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Mr. Speaker, I have no words to describe just how utterly unacceptable these comments are. But that's not all. In 2021, the gentlelady referred to Israel, which has the absolute right to defend itself against terrorism and attacks on its very existence, as an apartheid state. She even equated the United States and Israel, countries that have stood as beacons of democracy, to the Taliban and Hamas, organizations that impose terror on their regions in the world. Once again, even her Democrat colleagues swiftly condemned her comment. 12 Democrat members of this body released a statement which noted, equating the United States and Israel to Hamas and the Taliban is as offensive as it is misguided, ignoring the differences between democracies governed by the rule of law and contemptible organizations that engage in terrorism. At best discredits one intended argument and at worst reflects deep-seated prejudice from her own party. Some have decried this effort as a political game. Mr. Speaker, I assure you this is no political game. This resolution is not about engaging in a tit-for-tat with my colleagues.
By the close of his speech, Miller urged the entire House to unite and support the motion to remove Ilhan Omar from the Foreign Affairs Committee. He stressed that this wasn't about scoring political points or favoring one side over the other. It was about preserving the credibility of Congress and sending a clear message that prejudice and hostility have no place in public service. Miller reminded lawmakers that criticism of Omar's remarks had come from both Republicans and Democrats, using that fact to show the concern was rooted in shared values, not party loyalty. He framed the decision as a necessary step toward accountability and as proof that Congress still stands for fairness, respect, and integrity in representing the American people. After Miller's forceful address, political voices across the country quickly joined the debate. Commentators like Allison Reacts posted analysis clips online, describing how revisiting Omar's past comments was both revealing and troubling. Many argued that if a Republican had made similar remarks, the backlash would have been far more severe. They accused major media outlets of minimizing the controversy and failing to hold her to the same standard. For viewers, the moment carried a powerful message that words from public officials matter and accountability should never depend on political identity. The broader takeaway echoed through social media and news discussions. Consistency and responsibility must guide leadership, no matter which party is in question.
On the other side of the aisle, this is about keeping someone with a long record of anti-Semitic and anti-Israel bias off the Foreign Affairs Committee, which needs objective emissaries for our foreign policy. Even the Democrat former chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Eliot Engel, said that Representative Omar's anti-Semitic comments have no place in the Foreign Affairs Committee or the House of Representatives. That was in addition to the previously mentioned joint statement from 12 of the gentlelady's Democrat colleagues. The facts are clear. Representative Omar has espoused anti-Semitic and anti-Israel rhetoric time and again. She cannot be an objective contributor to the work of the committee, and she has brought dishonor to the House of Representatives. This body, this committee, which is viewed by nations around the world as speaking for Congress on matters of international importance and national security, should not have a seat for a member who would bring such dishonor to that committee. I encourage all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this resolution, to say with one voice that the United States House of Representatives does not condone hate, and to reaffirm we will always condemn anti-Semitism. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For many people watching, the most striking part of the debate wasn't the arguments or political back and forth. It was hearing Ilhan Omar's past remarks spoken aloud in the House chamber. When statements like those are read publicly, without commentary or defense, their impact feels much stronger. One after another, Miller repeated her most controversial lines, from the Benjamins tweet to the "some people did something" phrase, and her comparisons between the U.S., Israel, and extremist groups. Hearing them together left little room for interpretation. It forced lawmakers and viewers alike to reflect on how such words sound coming from an elected official. The moment wasn't about spectacle. It was about accountability. broadcast live for the entire nation to witness. Republicans used that moment to connect Omar's words to the pain of those who lost loved ones during the 9/11 attacks and to the service of the men and women who defended the country afterward. They argued that her remarks disrespected those sacrifices and diminished the memory of the victims. The emotional tone struck home for many Americans who take pride in their country's resilience and the courage of its citizens. By linking her comments to real people and their experiences, the discussion shifted from politics to something deeply personal and patriotic. For Democrats, however, the debate posed a more difficult challenge. Many had previously criticized Omar's remarks, but often defended her when Republicans moved to censure or remove her from committees. That created an appearance of mixed standards, condemning her statements in public, yet shielding her in votes. To many watching, it raised uncomfortable questions about whether party loyalty was outweighing genuine principle. The moment exposed a larger issue in Washington, that consistency and moral conviction often take a back seat to political alignment. Commentators like Allison React seized on this idea, focusing on what they called a clear double standard. They argued that if a Republican lawmaker had made comparable remarks about 9/11 or America's allies, the reaction would have been immediate and unforgiving. Yet in Omar's case, they said, coverage was softer and explanations were often offered on her behalf. This uneven treatment, they claimed, is why many Americans are losing faith in political and media institutions that seem to apply accountability selectively. The feeling of unfairness, they warned, continues to deepen public mistrust and widen the divide between citizens and leaders. Miller's choice to read Omar's own words on the House floor carried a symbolic weight. The chamber represents more than policy. It embodies the dignity, unity, and values of the nation. By bringing those remarks into that setting, he and his supporters aim to make a statement. Language that divides or damages America's image should not be normalized. For them, it was about defending the honor and credibility of Congress itself and reminding lawmakers that words carry real consequences at home and abroad. Another major focus during and after the debate was the role of the media. Critics accused mainstream outlets of minimizing controversies tied to Omar while giving far greater attention to even minor Republican missteps. They argued that this imbalance shapes public opinion and allows some politicians to avoid scrutiny. In response, many independent commentators took to social media, saying they were stepping in where traditional media had failed, to highlight stories they believed were being overlooked. To them, this wasn't just about Omar. It was about the broader question of who controls the national narrative and what truths get told. Miller also extended his argument beyond U.S. politics, warning that such controversies can hurt America's reputation abroad. When close allies like Israel sense hostility from American lawmakers, he said, it undermines trust and weakens the country's image as a reliable partner. Words spoken in Congress, he reminded everyone, carry weight around the world and influence how other nations view the United States. In the end, the debate felt like a national reflection on responsibility and leadership. It reminded Americans that words from those in power can heal or divide, and that accountability should apply equally to all. This wasn't about silencing voices, but about demanding higher standards from those who speak for the country. Critics argued that Omar's record showed a pattern of rhetoric that fueled division instead of unity, and they called on voters to expect more from their representatives. The closing sentiment was clear and heartfelt. America needs leaders who respect its values, honor its sacrifices, and strengthen its unity. Allison React summarized it best. This debate wasn't just about one member of Congress, but about the kind of leadership Americans want shaping their future. Their final message echoed with conviction. If the United States is to remain strong, it must stand firmly against words and actions that weaken its spirit or divide its people.